Okay. Stop me if you've heard this one before. So I go to one of my players and I say, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a new Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Would you be?" And before I can finish my sentence, this guy interrupts me and says, "Oh, awesome! I already have a character built. This is going to be great. I've been waiting to play it." Oh boy. Whenever I hear this, I'm not going to lie, it's one of the most frustrating things I can hear from one of my players. Hi. Do you want to be a better player? Me too. My name is William Tramp, also known as This F and GM. I usually stick to my lane. I talk about dungeon master advice. It's what I know. I've been dungeon mastering for well over 20 years now at this point. But I've only been playing for really a short time. I haven't really had a lot of chance to sit down at the table and be a player. It's kind of weird, right? Well, I put out one of my videos onto Twitter, and a friend of mine, Brown Wizard Winston, mentioned that he doesn't see a lot of videos out there for player advice. Well, I thought to myself, Winston, what are you talking about? There are tons of videos out there for player advice. And then I started really thinking about that, and I realized that most of the videos that are coming to mind are build advice, how to make a more effective character, how to use the rules to your advantage, which is great, but what about the other stuff? What about a character that fits in with the world? What about a character that can really have a chance to shine at the table, but also support their fellow players? What about just basic tabletop role playing game etiquette? Okay, I mean, there are videos out there for them, and many of them are really good, but I thought, there could be a few more. The world would not be made worse with one more video. So here I am. I'm here to talk to you players. Now, I do have a couple of disclaimers I want to get into, but overall, what my advice is going to center around today is how to make better characters for your long term campaigns. And we're going to do this by leaving an opening. Before we get started here today, I want to give three quick disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, this will not be the only video I make on the subject of leaving an opening for players. I have this one video planned for all of it, and my friend Dennis pointed out that that video is going to be like 30 minutes long. Nobody wants to listen to me talk for 30 straight minutes. My friends don't, my kids don't, my wife sure doesn't, and I'm pretty sure you don't either. Although if you do, hit that subscribe button. Disclaimer number two, I know, my shelves are a mess. They're falling apart. I'm saving up for better ones, but I got what I got. Disclaimer number three, making an advice video for players is difficult, especially when it's coming from a dungeon master, especially when it's a dungeon master you don't even know. Look, there are some classic advice pieces out there. Advice like bring food for everybody at the table. Pay attention to your dungeon master and to the other players. Take notes. If you do those three things, mwah, your DM's probably going to love you. But when we start to get a little deeper, the advice is trickier because there's a lot of different dungeon masters with a lot of different expectations out there. And there's a lot of different tables with a lot of different dynamics. At my table, I tend to run long term campaigns that are going to last months, if not years. It's a lot of time commitment, a lot of scheduling issues. But my advice doesn't work really well for more short term game players, more beer and pretzel game styles. There are a lot of different game styles out there, so there needs to be a lot of different types of advice. But me, I'm going to stick to what I know, which are these long term games. So know that going into this. Okay, buckle in, let's get going. In today's discussion of leaving an opening, I want to focus on character backstories. Now, for some players, maybe you, maybe the person sitting next to you, the character backstory can represent their big opportunity to write the next great fantasy novel, but I want to highly recommend avoiding that urge. Instead of coming to the table with pages and pages and pages of backstory, why not come to the table with an outline? An outline is great for giving a clear idea of the character, but while still leaving openings for more. This outline should cover details like where was the character born and what circumstances surrounded that birth. Who were the most impactful people in that character's life? Where did the character get their training that they use today? And what are some, not all, of the most important events that shaped the character's personality as we see it on that first day at the game table. Having an outline with these details not only will give you what you need to start playing, but also leave openings. Openings that are beneficial, not only beneficial for your character's relationship to the game world, not only beneficial for your character's relationship with the dungeon master, but also beneficial for your future plans. Let's talk about those for a moment. Your character's relationship to the campaign's game world is going to be one of the most important relationships that you cultivate throughout the course of gameplay. The game world provides a lot of the themes and concepts that your dungeon master is going to be presenting to you, and if your character's backstory doesn't leave an opening for those types of themes, then you might find yourself at a significant disadvantage when at the table. You see, because when people make these long backstories, they often have this idea in their head that the dungeon master will find a place to put it into that game world. And most DMs will do their best to find a place for it. But the thing is that if you didn't leave that backstory open, did you really leave room for the game world to be able to be plugged into your character's backstory? Remember that first example I gave when this video started about the player who hands over or who gets excited about a campaign before they've even heard the pitch, and about how they already have a character ready to go? Well, often when that happens, they mean their backstory as well. And if they haven't heard the pitch, that means they don't know what the game world that we're talking about. If they don't know the game world, are they going to be ready for it? You see, it's not just your character that has had events happen. It's also the world that has had events. I'm going to use an example from my very favorite Dungeons & Dragons campaign world to set adventures in. Eberron. I love using Eberron. It has a lot of great themes that I enjoy exploring, including corporate greed, post-war trauma, and that sort of Cold War feel. There's a lot to love about Eberron. But I want you to think about the fact that Eberron is centered around this 100-year-long war that literally wrapped up like 2 to 3 years ago, right? This war impacted everybody's life. Everybody's life, with like basically the sole exception being the Drow elves of Zindric, but that's a whole thing. Anyway, if you bring a character into Eberron and it doesn't include room for this great war, a war that encompassed every single living human's entire life, that's going to be weird, right? That's going to be weird. And it's going to be hard for your character to establish a relationship with a world that it can't connect to. So, leave an opening. Leave an opening for the game world to come in, to play. Leave an opening for those themes, those concepts that the game world tends to center around, so that way you can interact in as many ways as you possibly can. Leaving an opening in your backstory will also help you in establishing a better relationship with your dungeon master. Let me tell you, as a dungeon master who has received very long, very encompassing backstories, it's intimidating. I mean, it's great that you have flexed those creative muscles, but it's intimidating because what I hear when I receive these long backstories, what I hear is, hey, Dungeon Master, I want you to include every single detail that I have thought of in whatever narrative you are working to craft. Oh boy, that's a lot. Oh, that's a lot, especially when this is coming from you and the next player, and the next player, and the next player, and the next player. Why'd I choose an 8-person party? Ooh, that's a lot. That's a lot. But leaving these openings gives me enough to work with to get started, and we can add more as time goes on. And I don't have to feel like I'm being overwhelmed with waves of your desire. That sounded weird, but it's not weird because we're talking about backstory desires. Now, another thing that I think of as a dungeon master, and why I wish people would leave more openings is, I've got plans of my own, right? I'm not saying that I have a whole story all planned out, because otherwise, why are we even playing a game if I have the whole story planned out? But I do have ideas for villainous factions and for heroic organizations. I have ideas for big bad evil guys. And you know what makes a villain cool? Well, black leather and sweet knives. But you know what makes them even cooler is when they have a personal connection to one of my players. I see this often pop up when we get to those lone wolf backstories, the ones that they have almost no connections, and often these lone wolves have a singular goal, and that goal is to get revenge on the man who killed my father and or brother and or wife and or child and or vestigial twin. I don't know. These revenge-based backstories, right? And often when players come in with this one goal, this one person they must destroy, well, first of all, it makes it really difficult to bring you into the adventure, but also maybe your idea of this villain is very different than any villain I already have. Now, that's okay. I can find a way to incorporate another villain. That's not super hard for me to do, but I think it's even more meaningful when we can work together to tie your personal villain into the greater world at large. So leave an opening for me, the dungeon master. Let me feel a little less overwhelmed and also a little more excited to bring you in. Huh? I'm just going to say it. Often, players, I love you so much, but you're kind of short sighted. You see, because you got a lot of creativity coming in to the very first session. But did you ever think that maybe in a few months, you're still going to be just as beautifully creative? I bet you are. I mean, that's just kind of who you are. That's why I invited you to my game, right? But did you leave enough room for your character to flex those creative muscles a while from now? This is kind of a little secret, I think. I don't know if all of you are aware, but many of us dungeon masters are more than willing to work with you on your backstory in the world, even after the very first session, maybe even after the 50th session. We could work together. We could work together and make this happen in the middle of the darn campaign. It's beautiful because we're going to be playing this campaign for months, if not years. Now, current you, doesn't that sound awesome? Don't you think future you deserves a chance to add a little more to that backstory, a little more to become even more tied into what's going on? I sure think so. I love doing this. I love it when a player comes to me and says, "Hey, I just had this idea, and I know it's been a bit since I told you what's been going on with my character, but I just had this idea that'd be really cool if I were related to this thing that you created, this thing. I wish I had some sort of connection to it. Hey, if you left an opening, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it." It's a little secret. It's a little secret. It took some of my players a while to realize that I am absolutely willing to work with them. I don't really want to advertise that sometimes. I want to kind of leave a little bit of mystery, a little close to my chest, but I am open to it. And I bet you your dungeon master would be open to it too. But the best way to put yourself into a position to be able to help future you is by leaving an opening in that backstory. So that's it for today's advice. Some of it was very specific. Some of it was a little rambly, but that's generally just kind of my style. And some of it, hopefully was useful to you. Some of it you're going to just toss out the window. That's okay. I just wanted to provide you some different ideas that you can use when creating your character's backstory. Remember, leaving that opening, coming in with a outline rather than a fully fleshed out, airtight backstory can have benefits. Benefits for your relationship with the game world, benefits for your character's relationship with the dungeon master, and benefits for future you. Plus some others I imagine that I didn't even cover. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for being here and listening to me kind of ramble on a little bit about some of my thoughts on backstories. I will be back here in a while to talk about leaving an opening in character motivations, which is similar to the backstory, but a little bit different. But tonight, I'm going to head to bed because it's pretty late and I've got a game to run. So, see you later.